I was younger, my perception of politicians was also that they're men in suits who talk on the 8:30 news.
Sanna Marin is the world's youngest serving female prime minister and heads a coalition of 5 parties, all led by women. From being the first country in Europe to give equal voting rights, Finland has been praised for its historic approach to gender equality. But is all as good as it seems to be?
5 white, educated females is not very representative in the end.
And is this really a country for every woman?
Of course, our background still affects the possibilities that we have in life, and this shouldn't be the case, but of course we have problems.
For the first time, Finland's all-female leaders opened their doors exclusively for the BBC to show the inner workings of this historic government. Li Andersson is one of the 5 female party leaders that make up the country's coalition government. This week, the cabinet are going to be meeting to launch a signature government programme, the Equality Plan, aimed to improve equality across society, including on race and gender issues.
There's so much been made since December 2019 about this being such a young government and and the gender of this government as well. What are your thoughts when you read those headlines and you see the kind of top line of what the international media has been saying?
I have mixed emotions regarding it because on the one hand, I understand the power of example and the symbolic value of that. But I also think there is kind of this tendency of some people to say that because there is women, you will make a certain type of policy, or it's easier for you to agree when you're all women and so on. And that's not, I think, necessarily the case. And that's why I also want there to be a focus around the policy of the government, not just the gender of the female party leaders. I mean, in Finnish media, I think there's been some kind of comments around whether we all go to the sauna together. Because there's this old cliche about Finnish politics that the decisions are made in the sauna, something that had been heavily criticized in feminist circles because it's, the whole idea of male decision makers sitting in the sauna is based on this concept of decision makers being solely men.
Like a boys' club.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, what we want is not to reproduce the excluding structures that men have used as women, but really kind of to change those structures.
Li Andersson and Sanna Marin were both members of their respective youth parties years before taking office. A TV debate featuring them both from 2011 was one of the first times a wider Finnish public was introduced to them.
Se on myös aivan käsittämätöntä, että sä rinnastat näitä. Mun nähdäkseni Britanniassa kyse siitä, että on kyse nuorista ihmisistä, jotka kokee niin kuin voimattomuuden tunnetta. Sä oot syrjässä yhteiskunnassa. Silloin oli poliittinen projekti aivan eri tavalla kuin nämä. Se, että nämä nuoret ovat syrjäytyneet, ne ovat työttömiä, että ne kokee voimattomuuden tunnetta, että toimeentulon saanti on epävarmaa, on seurausta niin kuin oikeasta politiikasta, mikä siinä maassa on harjoitettu. Et yksi syy, mikä
When I was younger, my perception of politicians was also that they're men in suits who talk on the 8:30 news. And they are like at a huge distance from me or my family or my everyday life. I mean, especially when we're in youth organizations, I think there is a huge amount of idealism which you should have when you're working in the youth organizations, which I kind of miss in a way in myself. So I think both me and Sanna have kind of were a lot more work focused and maybe also a bit more aware of kind of the political realities of the field we're working in now compared to what we did when we were in the youth organizations.
Prime Minister Sanna Marin grew up in a modest-sized town 2 hours northwest of Helsinki called 𝗃𝗶𝗯𝗲. She was raised in a low-income family of lesbian mothers and was the first person to go to university in her family. While she speaks honestly about her background, she remains fiercely guarded about her family and private life.
So she would have been in any one of these classrooms?
She has been in all these classrooms, and I have taught in all these classrooms, but not.
At 𝗃𝗶𝗰𝗲 High School, 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗲, her former head teacher, recalls his memories.
She was just an average girl, nothing extreme, nothing special.
When you look at her in her first year of leadership, do you think any parts of her childhood or her upbringing would have informed how she is as a leader now from what you can see?
I think in common sense that her childhood has not been very easy. Her strength and hard-working way to do things and leadership must have got something from her youth and childhood.
Education Minister Li Andersson is attending a round-circle chat with high schoolers.
How did you guys feel when you saw this new government?
Well, I didn't really mind that much. I mean, it's nice. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. Yeah. It is nice to see women, but I mean, I feel like as I've grown up, I've always felt that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So that's why seeing a woman didn't really mean that much, because I knew that it didn't really matter.
Lee's government has an equality plan that's going to be addressing a lot of issues, including education, to make an experience of yours easier in school. What would you suggest would be a change?
Maybe like when in health education we do like sexuality and gender, it's more focused on, you know, cisgendered and heterosexual people. It's mostly the students, I think, who talk about it more, you know, bring it up in classes
Yeah, I
with
agree.
teachers. So.
The education, it tells a lot about what's important, what's valuable, what's the things you want to like teach to the younger ones. And if you don't include the minorities, then people don't learn about it.
In reality, it's quite a lot dependent on teachers, and it's also dependent on the school. And I think all teachers do not necessarily have the tools that they would need to educate you, and maybe sometimes you need to educate the teachers.
Yeah. Although Finland is celebrated for its equality, recent reports from the Council of Europe have detailed what they call a concerning rise in racism in the country. 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗲 Forsgren is the only black politician in Finland's government, and 𝗃𝗏 is the chair of Finland's anti-racist forum.
For us in the outside, when you look at Finland, you know, one of the first countries in the world to allow women to vote and run for government, you know, really good laws when it comes to maternity leave and also paternity leave, real conversations that are being had about the pay gap. Is that inclusive of all women? Would you say that it's inclusive of black women as well?
Niin on myös se, että vaikka sä kouluttautuisit todella korkealle, niin sä et silti saa sun oman alan töitä. Eli Suomessa ei ole ehkä totuttu, niin kuin Bellakin aikaisemmin puhui siitä, että ei ole totuttu siihen, että mä en ihan näe, että niin kuin kaikille vähemmistöille ehkä se niin kuin sellainen yhteiskunnan osallisuus tulee ihan näistä kaikista mekanismeista, mitä meidän kuitenkin hyvinvointiyhteiskunnassa on laitettu paikoilleen sen takia, että kaikilla olisi tasa-arvoiset ja yhdenvertaiset mahdollisuudet.
Eli siinä mielessä tavallaan se on myös vaarallista tyydyttäytyä sellaisen, että koska Suomella on ennen mennyt hyvin, niin nyt meillä varmasti menee myös tulevaisuudessa. Mutta on ollut ihana nähdä, että nyt niitä askeleita on taas otettu oikeaan suuntaan niin kuin tämän hallituskauden aikana, mutta on myös paljon niin kuin tehtävää vielä kaikin puolin.
If we had exactly the same conditions, exactly the same timing, exactly the same age, exactly the same family background, and yet Sanna Marin was black, would she be Prime Minister?
Now?
Not now.
No.
Nyt ei.
Not now.
She was the first Minister of the Interior, female Minister of the Interior at the 80s, but you saw quite many from the previous decades. And she was in the office while it was the Chernobyl accident. What happened in Finland was that people didn't know what is happening there, and we got the information quite late and so on. So then she didn't get re-elected anymore afterwards and so on. So But then we've had some females afterwards, not too many, and actually on the first green ever in this ministry. So cool. So that's something new.
I think the representation with 5 white educated females is not very representative in the end. And there were a lot of critical writings when this photo went viral that, hey, if we really look at the equality here, it doesn't show yet. And I agree on that. The idea of maintaining, taking care of the welfare state as a system led me to study social politics. And I thought that, okay, I've got quite a lot of help from the welfare state. My dad especially were unemployed and had some substance abuse problems. They divorced while I was 1 year old, so I was also brought up with a single mother for a little while in my life. So maybe this background info is something that in many countries this would not be the beginning for a political career. Because actually Tarja Halonen, who you probably know, the first female president and the only female president, she says that it's not the person who breaks the glass ceiling, but it's the people who follow. And I think that's to the point. You need the persons who break the ceiling, but then you also need all the people who will follow. And you should never stop that.
Far up in the Arctic Circle, Finland's northern territory is home to Europe's only indigenous population, the Sami people. Sami's ancestral land spread across from Russia to Sweden, and the Sami people still live off the land. In Finland, they were only officially recognised by the government in the 90s, and they still face a battle for their right to the land and their way of life. Can you only get cloudberries in Finland?
I think all over the Arctic region.
It's an Arctic fruit.
Yes. It's our vitamin bomb.
It's a little vitamin pill.
Yes, it's very good for you.
Sarah Weslin is a journalist based in the Sami town of 𝗏𝗏. She works for the Finnish broadcaster YLE, where she's one of the 2 reporters to work in the Skolt Sami language. What are the major sort of issues concerning Sami people right now?
We don't have a Sami representative in the Finnish government.
Is that worrying?
Yes, of course. And there's been many of years there's been a talk about and discussion about it, that should Samis have their own representative, for example, in EU.
In your ideal future, what would you like this government to do? What would you like Sanna Marin to do for Sami women?
We don't have to be ashamed that we are Samis living in Finland. We can be proud that we are part of Finnish nation. Even being in the table, even being in the room with the decision making. One old saying that nothing about us without us.
One of the main issues addressed in the government equality plan is the rights of gender minorities in Finland. Trans rights activists have for years asked for a reform of the Trans Act, a law that currently requires those seeking legal gender recognition to undergo enforced sterilisation.
Well, Finland is the only Nordic country that still requires infertility in order to get your legal gender recognized. So in order to get the M to F or F to M, you need to prove that you cannot have biological children. In some cases, the people can become infertile enough by taking hormones. But if you are unable to take hormones or do not want to take hormones, then you will not get your legal gender recognized until you are in some other way found infertile, meaning that at the end, if nothing else helps, then it's a surgical removal of the organs. For example, for me, the case was that I was already perceived as a male when I started the legal process. And it still took me 2.5 years with a female passport, meaning that I could not travel outside of basically Nordic countries. And I couldn't apply for a job, couldn't apply for nothing without having issues, having to prove my identity. That made me be in a hurry with the medical part. We have had a female president, we have the youngest female leader of country, but alone that doesn't, it's just a token alone. It has to have the support of the system behind it before it actually makes a difference in the law. We've had a coalition with some sort of a very conservative party saying that if this goes forward, we will resign from the coalition. And all the other parties have caved in and said, okay, fine, let's do it next time then.
So it's possible that the Trans Act could be the sacrificial lamb once again?
It looks that way.
Any coalition government is a mixed bag of politics and agendas that have come together in the hope of being more effective. But to implement any real change or government plans requires unanimous support across the board.
When you build a government in Finland, you put a lot of effort on what we call the government's program. And there is negotiations, we had it for 3 weeks in 2019. And then when you have that program, everyone knows that this is it. This is what we have decided together. When you are 5 different parties, you have to, all the time, try to see how you find solutions when you have different opinions.
I mean, no party can have it just their own way, and sometimes there are these kind of tensions that has to do with making compromises behind closed doors. And then, of course, we're all one government, so we all have to defend the compromises that we make in public.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. So
should we walk up together?
Yeah.
Great.
Finland's party leaders are meeting at Helsinki's Houses of the Estates for the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, a cabinet meeting to discuss the new equality programme. Trans rights and racism are on the agenda.
Do you prep yourself up before doing these questions?
No. They ask and I will answer honestly,
yeah.
So you don't need any preparation.
Please enter the conference password.
Finland has had coalition governments forever. So of course we are used to trying to make compromises and trying to find consensus between different parties and ideologies, and I think it's also a big strength for us. Of course it's not always the fastest way to get things done, but I think it's more, it goes farther, this kind of decisions than the ones that you only make yourself. There's always one or few issues on the table that we all want to discuss together so that we will have different perspectives. For example, equality program is something that not only one minister or ministry can do, it's something that every ministry have to focus on and make decisions in their field.
Gender minorities are also discussed in the equality programme, particular transgender people, and Finland has been in the spotlight. It's been 3 years since the European Court of Human Rights has said that forced sterilisation should not be allowed in terms of recognising personal gender identity, but it is the case still in Finland. What do you think about that?
Everyone should have the right to determine their own identities. So I think we need to do many changes in our legislation, and our governmental program actually supports this kind of idea.
For you, are trans women women?
Well, it's not my job to identify people. It's everyone's job to identify themselves. If someone feels that he or she is a woman, then it's not my place to say.
Mutta ensimmäisenä siis tämä hallituksen tasa-arvo-ohjelman asia. Ja toinen tämänkin päivän agendaan liittyvä kysymys on tietenkin se, että tämä koronaviruspandemia on jälleen osoittanut sen, kuinka haavoittuvimmassa asemassa olevat ihmiset, niin naiset kuin myös vähemmistöihin kuuluvat ihmiset ovat monellakin tavalla valitettavasti.
One of the things with early COVID response was a lot was written about how well Finland, Taiwan, New Zealand, Germany did in terms of their COVID responses. There was quick, decisive action. And the other thing that all those countries have in common are female leaders.
Well, of course, there are countries led by men that have also done well. So I don't think it's a gender-based issue. I think we should more focus on how the countries that have done well, what they have done, what they have learned, what we all can learn from each other, and that we also have response together, because it's a global pandemic.
At some point, something might change, and that popularity might change when a decision needs to be made, especially maybe during COVID times as well. Does that worry you at all?
I don't look at polls. The most important thing is that we try to make the decisions that we have to make based on the best knowledge that we can use, and also that we are trying to make decisions in a way that helps ordinary people in their ordinary lives, in crisis and also in normal times. Of course, our background still affects the possibilities that we have in life, and this shouldn't be the case, but of course we have problems. It's not the last time that we will discuss these issues. Of course, it's important that we are all focused on how we will make the program a reality. So this is my mission as a Prime Minister.
But there are challenges ahead. And no Prime Minister in Finland has seen a full term for decades. But with 85% approval rating, Sanna Marin is enjoying a striking level of confidence in uneasy times.